Well, as a sign of the times this morning, I was packing things to come here, and I had wardrobe confusion. I didn't know if I should wear blue and white, and I had glasses confusion because I need reading glasses, I need distance glasses, I need prescription sunglasses, and now, after seeing Iron Man 3 and The Great Gatsby, I own my own 3D glasses. But it's wonderful to be here today on the heels of Canadian Children's Book Week, when authors, illustrators, and storytellers visited schools across the country. Kids today are lucky. They have great books from which to choose and even get to meet some of their favorite authors. And we're lucky because Canadian children's books are internationally recognized as first class, and especially we're known to have the best picture books in the world. When teachers ask me to do workshops, they almost all say the same thing. Our school growth plan focuses on improvement in writing. Writing skills are critical to academic success, and more than ever before, math and science are language-based. Most employers care about writing skills, and in a labor force full of mediocre writers, someone who writes well stands out. So when I visited schools for Book Week in York Region, I set up displays of good children's literature last week. Picture books, novels, poetry, and nonfiction. David Booth says the more kinds of text kids read, the stronger writers they will be. And picture books are meant for people of all ages. So get to know the ones with rich language. Young writers need continual nourishment from expert writers. At my workshops, we begin with me asking the kids, who are your favorite authors? And kids say authors of classic books like Roald Dahl and Judy Blume. They also mention relative newcomers like Melanie Watt, creator of the hugely popular Chester series. In doing this, the kids get recommendations from one another. And then I ask, what do you like about their stories? And the kids say, they make me laugh. There's lots of adventure. They're interesting. Eventually, I steer them to being writers. Now it's your turn. Pretend you are going to write something. What's the first thing you need to have? I give them a hint. It starts with the letter I. And the answer, of course, is we need to have an idea. For most writers, coming up with a good idea is the hardest part of writing. So we discuss where writers get ideas from. They get ideas from everyday life, from books, from their own interests, from nature, from dreams, from families, from memories, from thoughts, feelings, television, computers, and lastly, their imagination. I like to focus on getting ideas from everyday life because that's where kids already know lots of details. And details are what help make writing interesting. It's hard to write about things you've never experienced. I also like to focus on getting good writing ideas from other books, because the more kids read and the more we read to them, they learn about writing. Good authors teach kids new words. They teach kids ways to start stories, ways to end stories, and even ways to think of catchy titles. This spring, Melanie Watt has a new book called Scaredy Squirrel Goes Camping. She starts this story right with the main character's name. Scaredy Squirrel never goes camping. He'd rather be comfortable inside than risk going out in the wilderness. Other authors start with a question. Other authors start with a sound, like bang, to catch our attention. So you know what's a great thing for us to do? Every time you read to your students, come back to the beginning and see how did that writer start that story. Some teachers even keep a chart, good story starters by good writers. And if you do that, post it in your room, your students will have many ways to start stories. Robert Munch has hundreds of story ideas, and most of his stories come from everyday life. Things kids relate to. Aaron's hair. Ask your kids, how many of you have ever had a bad hair day? And they have all kinds of stories about that. Andrew's loose tooth. Ask your kids, how many of you have ever lost a tooth in an interesting way? And they have stories about that. But Robert Munch has trouble writing the words sometimes. You know what he says? We all learn to talk before we learn to write. And it helps to say our stories out loud first. Elementary students are still learning to talk. Not baby words anymore, but bigger and more interesting vocabulary as their own experience develops. So in linking to what Bob said this morning, they need to engage in conversations. We need to give them opportunities to listen and respond to stories. These activities help develop their vocabulary, and this, by extension, will help them develop their writing. Teaching writing is complex because you have to know the elements of writing, that's the content, and the mechanics of writing. These elements apply to both narrative and expository writing. And creativity applies just as much to nonfiction writing as fiction. Because writing involves so many skills, a lot of teachers I meet approach it with trepidation. Their expertise may lie in another area. Last week, a teacher said to me, "Thanks for your session. Of everything I teach, I'm most uncomfortable about writing." And let's face it, elementary teachers are responsible for many subjects, not just language arts. And you have many programs on your mind. But you don't have to be an expert writer to teach writing. If literacy is your mandate, you do need to know the qualities of good writing in order to make connections between reading and writing. So use good children's books as your tools. I like the writing traits model because it breaks writing into manageable parts. We begin with ideas, then we add details, then we try to organize them through story webs, plot organizers, storyboards, bullets, point form. And once we have a plan, we try to say things in our own voice. We choose the best words and try and make our sentences flow. Then we concentrate on the conventions and presentation. When we work in this order, ideas come before conventions. So when your students show you a piece of writing, why focus on punctuation or spelling first? if the details are confusing. We want to sort out the content and then move them forward with the mechanics. Often, I like to read Chester's masterpiece. And usually it's to the uproarious laughter of primary kids. When Melanie's cat, Chester, tries to write his own masterpiece, a duel ensues. This is a great book for teaching voice. Primary kids can easily distinguish between exasperated Melanie. Chester, what are you up to? Chester, this is unacceptable. Chester, that's not funny. And bossy Chester, this is my book. I can write whatever I want. Australian author Mem Fox says that when you write, let your personality be heard in what you say and how you say it. That's what voice means. You can be an excellent writing teacher by exposing your students to the best books possible and use them to demonstrate specific skills. For example, when you come across a book with lots of characters talking, dialogue, like Gordon Corman, for example, let's list all the alternatives this writer uses to said. Notice how the author uses his senses to describe things. In this way, you're teaching writing. Kenneth Opel, author of the Sunwing, Silverwing, Firewing, Darkwing series, and Airborne, and Skybreaker, is a master of description. As one grade 6 boy said, he makes you feel like you're right there. Kenneth Opel does this by using his senses. Listen to this passage from his book called Airborne. With a hiss, the 2 doors pulled in and rolled flush along the ship's hull. The wind, the drone of the engines, the pungent smell of the tropical sea poured into the bay. Below, starlight painted the ocean silver. See how he uses his senses to give us a picture in our minds? You can also use books as examples to teach your kids ways to think of catchy titles. Always encourage your kids to wait until the end of their writing to come up with a title, because it's tricky. Effective titles do 2 things. They capture the reader's interest, and they give a clue to the topic. So often, authors like to use alliteration in their titles. Think of Smelly Socks by Robert Munch, The Bully Boys by Eric Walters, or in nonfiction, Backyard Birds by Robert Bateman. Other times, authors use one word to make a catchy title. Think Pigs by Robert Munch, Hatchet by Gary Paulson, Holes by Louis Satcher. A third way to think of catchy titles is rhyming words. Susan Nielsen has a novel, a YA novel called Word Nerd. Frida Wyszynski wrote a picture book called Oonga Boonga. So again, you can post a chart in your room so that kids have examples throughout the school year of all the different ways to think of catchy titles. After I've helped kids with all kinds of strategies in my 1-hour session together, I like to finish with a segment on editing, because that's my background. I write the kids a message, and then I ask them to give me all the good things they can say about my message. Because after all, writing is a person's thoughts, feelings, and ideas. So they can say things like, I like some of the words you used. They can say, your message is clear and well organized. They can say, it's a good length. And after they've made me comfortable as a writer, we look at ways to improve the writing. And I usually like to demonstrate some of the basic proofreader's marks, because we have standard marks we use to show how to insert space. We go like this. If you want to insert space between two words, this is the sign. This is the proofreader's mark. Now, when I'm working with kids and they see this, some of them say, that's a pound key on your phone. The math whizzes tell me it's a number sign. The musical kids see it as a sharp. The game players see it as a tic-tac-toe. And the 2013 students see it as a hashtag. You'll find lots of writing strategies in my books. You can adapt them to your program. Whether you're an experienced teacher or want to feel more sure-footed about writing, I hope this lifts your learning and offers insight in many new ways. Thank you.